Claude, you can back up your camera a little bit. We're on the air.
Right there.
Give me a few seconds. I'm going to post the link. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Phil Two Eagle. I'm the executive director of the Seatown Treaty Council. And we're here today with one of our elders and Treaty Council members. I want to introduce Claude Tualk, our member of our Treaty Council, and he is also lives on the Rosebud, Sichongo Makoche, Rosebud Sioux Reservation. And we're going to talk about traditional Lakota knowledge on climate change. Oh yeah, Tona anagop tana kabena you have open like chichapelo leon petu ki hahashi Claude Tualk she wongla kapitalo e honey le makoche ki le toske ianki ki le hahashi wala kapelo okate nisha osni nisha na watoa simamene ki kapuze nisha wakpala hena kapuze naisha wamani omani chanka walaka naisha mila makazi nisha iwobu shita nisha tijia hena cha ya kata ugana hashi ichak ya in tuna ya wana wale ya ihuni taku wanke nish taku ableze hena cha ya kuku organize honey with choyaki na soyana chichi oyaki Claude here kashi here yellow ai un après un zila ai she oniani haska tsawa you hear that like
mitake pia kokaya charge mitake kokala huchoka wa okia o bani ala chala charge ke hema kup tiosh by mitake you can't have mitake wa ki he um 18 communities journey to healing money na wacheka chunko aglagla sobriety walk at top kana awashichu like Journey to Healing was initiated in 1991, and I sat with the leaders of the communities, beginning with Parm Lee, and we started a annual walk. It was, I'm thinking, on the second Saturday of May of every year. We only had a grant that was for years, but that grant ran out, and we continued to do that. And that went all the way up to like 2004. And in 1996, my Teoshpai gave me the name Tokala Hochoka Waokyo Money. When I was a little boy, we used to go to Wamblee. We lived about 15 miles east of Wamblee, called a community that was originally called Pass Creek Community. And when the Christian churches were made, were brought into Wamblee, Christians and Indian agents worked together to have everybody baptized and move closer to the churches. They wanted people to go to church, so they moved to a Catholic church and an Episcopal church in Wamblee, and we were forced to get baptized. You had a choice. We were even told by my grandpa that through my dad that if you didn't choose, then they chose for you. They flipped the coin. Heads were Episcopal and tails was Catholic. And that's how you got baptized into the church. And then the names were given through drawing the name, your first name out of the hat. And this whole process happened during the assimilation process. And there was a lot of those that resisted, and they didn't want to be involved in that in the Christian movement. And so they still try to practice their ways. And we got taught going to sweat or praying with the pipe, or you were sent first to jail, and after 2-3 times, they put a label on your forehead and called you insane. and they sent you to a place called Canton, and south of Sioux Falls, and it was called the Hiawatha Insane Asylum. And a lot of horror stories came from that. A lot of them died there. And anyway, I come from the Buffalo Hunships to Oshpaya and Moose Camp, and the Pute to Oshpaya, Wombly, Lips Camp. And my mom is Nellie Fire, and her dad was named Silas Fire. And the longer name was Carries the Fire, or Keeps the Fire. And my grandpa on my mom's side was from Hokoju, or Minikoju, in Eagle Butte. And he had 3 other brothers. And so they were all very honorable men. And so I come from that type of background. And my way of life was, I wasn't registered till I was 6 years old. My mom finally put me on the birth certificate got me, so I lived out in the country the first 9 years of my life. And I went to school from there. And I learned how to speak English at a Tudor public school. And later on went to the day school. And my grandfather, his name was Robert Chuok. And Robert Chuok is a survivor of Wounded Knee. My great grandma saved my grandpa from the massacre at Wounded Knee. She saved not only those 2, but 3 other Hakoshas from that massacre and butchering, I always call it. And they ran through the creeks, and she covered them with bloody blankets and smeared blood on their face and told them not to move when the cavalry came up the creeks. So they witnessed a lot of horror that went on to our people. And they made it to the stronghold. And they stayed at the stronghold for a while, and then they finally moved to Wombly and lived with the Standing Bear family. And from there, they went on to school to Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And my grandpa finished and came back, and he said, my dad told me that, he told me when they came back to Chamberlain, the train bridge that ran across the river, the Missouri River, got washed out. So they had to, but they wanted to go home so bad. 4 of the guys his age finished at Carlisle and the school there, and so they made a homemade raft, and they crossed to Missouri like that. But halfway through, one of them fell off. The raft they made out of logs, whatever they could put together. One of them fell off, and the other one tried to save him and jumped in a river, and both drowned. So my grandpa, Robert, and another guy made it to the other side. And from there, they made it back to Wombly. And my grandma, Nettie, Buffalo Hunships, he married. And from there, they had 5 children. And my dad was a middle child. And my dad was, my grandpa let him drop out of school when he was in 3rd grade. He said, I know what the Washichas are trying to do to us. He said, they're trying to erase our language, and they're trying to erase our spirituality, our culture. So he told my dad, he said, you stay home and you hang on to the language and the culture and our way of prayer. And from there, when my dad got older, he married my mother, and they had 9 children. And from the 9 children, I am the youngest of 9. So,
Now better ki ogana taku hani yexia na in climate change out get you won't like.
now,
Hani takun o wichoya ke ni yexia hechi na ogana oicha ke yaki. Lila o khate ni lila o snini. Taku malaka na ogana wakpala na ogana meniki na opta yanish. Takun yexia hechi unchi ni Trukashi la wichaya nish takun average yugna ina ola naku olako yaki.
back in my days of listening to my grandmas, my mom took me to my grandma's a lot of the grandmas got together and they visited, and these log cabins. These log cabins had dirt roof. So inside that log cabin, it was cool, and they had dirt floors. So they would gather and they would sit and tell stories about long ago. And they told stories about climate change then. And how the weather was changing then. They were talking about the medicines that they collect. Ahane wiya ke hana pejuta, ichage ke hana agalagla, makpala agalagla, nishmani ke hana ichage. A lot of the medicines that we have for our people grew along the creeks and the springs and the dams. And a lot of them, the women were because of their good energy, they're the ones that went to these plants and the herbs, and they had names for them. And they would sing songs. Each plant and each herb had a song, and they would sing for them. And if that plant was willing to give the medicine to us, to them, they would bring their energy up, and it was time for them to get harvested. So that's the type of power that the Lakota women had long ago. And when the climate change started to happen, they started to notice that the plants were not, a lot of them died because of early frost. And just when they're budding, started to bud out, it would turn cold. So a lot of the pejuta, the medicines, started getting weaker and weaker. And so they were the ones that I heard that our medicines are getting weaker because of the climate change. And they noticed the migration patterns of the animals and the birds, how they would still hang around, even though, or some would come too early and get caught in a snowstorm. And they would talk about a lot of the animals doing the same thing, and they would get sick. And they would say, "Hu topa ki wana toshke wetu ke toksha." The weather is changing, and the winter patterns and spring and summer, they're getting shorter, and the animals are getting sick. And in my day, I started to see that too as I was going back and forth to college. I seen this long line of deer following each other. And to me, they looked like they were sick. They were following each other right one at a time. And they weren't even scared to get run over on the highway. They stopped the traffic. They were crossing the road between Winter and the river, White River. They were crossing the road, long line of them, maybe about 200 deer. And they had their heads down and they were walking towards the west. And our warlocks, what they're teaching, they say the Black Hills are sacred. It's Waka. So even our animals too, when they get sick, they go towards the Black Hills. And I seen that twice. I also seen that happen just west of Palm Lee. Another long line of deer were going towards the west. But they didn't care if they got hit by cars or traffic. They were all following each other one after another. So these are things that I see and know that the Peshuta, the medicines that we collect, there was always a prayer. The women collect the medicines and they would harvest them with their good energy to give to the medicine men and prepare the medicines for the people. And they would use that for ceremony. And medicines were made and given. But they started to notice that it was very rare that some medicines had the potency of the true medicine was supposed to give to the people. So these are things that I saw and heard from the grandpa of the grandmas. They talked a lot about even the birthing process and how we come into this world, how the cycles have to meet spring, summer, fall, and winter. And I just noticed that in these last 20 years, the spring is, we don't hardly have a springtime or a fall time. It's starting to get cold and starting to get hot and cold again and hot again. So this creates a lot of animals to also be in that lost world. There was a few moose that came down from the north and came into a community along the river. So far, 3 moose that come wandering in from the north. So even they are affected by these coldness and warmness and these patterns of weather's been changing. And I noticed that the winters are going further and further east. The heavier snowstorms are going towards the east coast. So this affects our behavior, and all this comes from what I was told was from the greed that was brought to this island we call the Turtle Island, which is the United States and Canada and Alaska. And what was brought to our people and pollution that's affected our land, our water, and our air. And so far, the air went from the carbon dioxide, the fossil fuels that are being used. It's creating our planet to get warm. Yeah, honey, we choice how to Hannah. Now you had so a while now what no you know took that Tiwai means hell, and we show you can oblake. Thank you.
Nachti apge yokis nachti hapte. Ogana ahani Oshitita Yexian 1977. Great blizzard of the Great Plains. Yexia.
There was one before that in the 60s. We moved to town. Well, we went to visit in Wombly, and we got snowed in. And it snowed and snowed so bad that the local ranchers and farmers, their cows were frozen. So they, some that connected to town on their tractors told the people, if you're hungry, all those cows that are frozen, if you could go over there, you can butcher them. So I remember it was so bad that we ran out of wood. My family started to use our fence posts for our yard to cut and keep our house warm. And I remember there used to be a commodity vegetable called lentils, and we had bags and bags of lentils. So I remember eating lentil soup almost 3 times a day. Yeah.
What about the heat? Do you remember any extreme heat as you was growing up?
Yeah. The local, when we moved to town, all the creeks and the dams started to dry up because of the heat, and the moisture. There was hardly any clouds bringing in moisture, and I remember us little guys would always want to go swim, but there was no place to swim. And the elders were always talking about that the climate change was on us, and that things were going to get worse as we go through life.
About any any tornadoes?
Oh yeah. I grew up with our families that had a lot of our medicine men and women. I remember one of my grandmas from Lower Brew. Her last name was Swift Talk. There was a big tornado coming towards Wombly, and her daughter told her that she said, we need your help. She was an elder woman, but they quickly loaded the pipe. They had a little pipe ceremony, pipe loading, and then she helped her mom outside. We all went out there with her, and she stood there as a pipe, and she prayed. And the tornado actually did split, and that was witnessed by all of us as we saw what happened, what kind of power our medicine people had in those days. So from that time, it seemed like the communities that did have tornadoes go through them, they always say, well, there's no spiritual people there. And they must have all been, gone by then, or nobody practices that way of prayer. So anyway, those are things that I remember.
About the Missouri River, Minnesota, do you remember times when that went down, or the White River?
Uh, the White River. I remember I went down to almost like a creek, a little flowing creek, and we used to just jump across it. Used to just go and just jump across it, and my dad would always during the spawning time, a catfish will come up to White River. So and it comes up to the creeks, like Pass Creek, is connected to the White River. So when we go along the creeks, my dad would find these big catfish and trying to swim back towards where the bigger water was. And we were thankful then and ate a lot of catfish.
Yeah, there were times when the Missouri River froze over. That's when people came across.
Yeah, I remember those stories too. And my uncle was one of my uncles was last name was Longcrow. He was a policeman, and he said they used to drive in their Model Ts or Model A's or whatever, their older vehicles. They would drive across the ice to haul their. I think there was a jail on Bro, so they would cross the river on the ice, which shortened the ride on going all the way around. And he always talks about that. He said, "Yeah, it was pretty thick ice in those days."
Remember our elders talking about the times when our people were in the Carolinas and then traveled to the woodlands. We were, they say we were on a 1,000-year journey back from the Black Hills to the Carolinas to the East Coast, and then back to the Black Hills again. And I think it was our elder Victor Duville said that the trees move, even the trees moved south, going back to the Ice Age. So when the Ice Age was coming down, he felt that the trees moved. So it's not just about the Tatanka movement. We also move because of the climate change.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be tough.
Yeah, I heard stories that we migrated in 4 directions from the Black Hills. Well, we always came back to the Black Hills. And during the times of movement, that's where I learned that the men that were selected to go ahead of the camp, the trail that we're going either direction, they would send a group of men that was selected that had good hearts and generosity, and they would go ahead of the camp, and they were called Hokala, and they would make relatives so that our people, when we were coming in that direction, we were greeted and treated in a good way, and we made friends like that. We made relatives, and I was told by my medicine relatives that when we pray, when we send a voice out into the universe, our prayer makes relatives out there that makes a circle and it comes back to us. It makes relatives as it goes out into the universe. So that's the same way of life that we live, and why we communicate with the stars, and what's sacred above is sacred below. So there was a lot of respect, and our way of life that we live was according to what was that we're part of. We're part of the star people. That's what I heard. And what we do and how we live our way of life was always respect to that invisible world called that sacred energy, or today we call Wolakota. And that Wolakota, today I see it shrinking and shrinking. Very few people really practice that way of prayer, our way of life.
I wondered about what our people were doing at the Pajishla, the greasy grass, 1876. Some say they were there to gather medicine and also to, I don't know, remember the elk, Echaka migration was at a certain time of the year. And our people kind of knew these patterns. So they would be at a different time and different place during those years.
Yeah.
During it's important for us to look at the Ocheti Shakoi wars that we had. Those kind of places us at certain times, at a certain time period. So I'm looking through Victor's PowerPoints. So you have the Overland Trail, Hochwoju, and the Flemington fight of June 15, 1854. And then you had the Groton fight, August 19, 1854. And then you had the mail coach raid, November 13, 1854. And the Blue Water Creek, September 3rd, 1855. And then you go look at the Minnesota revolt around the 1857, 1862. New Elm and Birch Coulee. And then you also had all these battles up and down the Ocheti Shakoi territory. There was the Julesburg battle, 1865. There was a Horse Creek revolt, Moonlight battle, Donner Station fight, Platte Bridge battle, coal skirmishes. And they call those the Southern War, the Custer Panicular, 1867. On and on, the Bozeman War, Bozeman Trail War. It went from 1866 to 1867. And then you have the Black Hills War, 1872 to 1873, to 1876, 1877. And then the Ghost Dance years were the killing of Sitting Bull, 1890, Wounded Knee Massacre, 1890. Chief Two Strike attacks the 7th Cavalry on December 30, 1890. And even then, during the Wounded Knee Massacre was the coldest cold spell that came in during that time. So the Overland Trail or Platte River War commenced around 1854, 1855. Consisted of 4 engagements caused by the creation of the Oregon Trail and the $10 cow incident. Those involved was Groton, Conquering Bear, and Littleton. Lots and lots of history to talk about. 10 more minutes, Claude. Do you have any closing remarks on the climate change that's going on today. Maybe give the people a message to prepare, maybe to prepare for the upcoming years. We have heat coming and maybe extreme temperatures, extreme weathers that are coming, drought and things like that are coming. And it seems like it's just business as usual today. Nobody's concerned, it feels like, or are the people concerned? Or do you know of people that are concerned about climate change?
You know, those warnings that the elders gave, they were telling the younger generations that what's coming in the future. And I feel that, you know, our people went through waves and waves of historical trauma that we started to start really leaning towards what can we do? We became kind of helpless and falling victim to alcohol and drugs. And so we need to set those aside and start to think of our children and our grandchildren, future generations, what's coming. Start to eat the appropriate foods and start to create greenhouses. You know, greenhouses, you can, you have some control of plants and herbs. So you do have some control on the harvest time of the foods that we eat or some of the medicines that we grow. But that connection that I always feel that I always call it the umbilical cord, chekpa, that once was connected, the medicines that we grow, it also doesn't contain the full energy of Mother Earth because it's not coming from her. So, but greenhouses have some of that, the energy. So reluctantly, those who do have greenhouses are helping with some of the herbs and plants that are getting washed away by floods and whatever. The concern is like the changing water of the Missouri and the rivers when it rises, it washes away a lot of our valuable medicines that help us live. So it's good that we do start making greenhouses and start to teach our young people what's coming. I was told through listening to scientists and others about America going under the water in 10 years or something like that. 30% of the America is going to be underwater, something like that. Anyway, so there's been a push for the whole global attention on trying to find the balance back to nature and stop this greenhouse effect and cutting down on the fossil fuels. So yeah, we could listen to both contemporary type of things going on in our country and other countries. What are they doing? What are we doing to help each other? And that's what's coming, is that we need to help each other. for the long run.
A couple of things that come to mind is what can the tribal government, the IRA tribal government, do for the people? We know that the heat is coming, and how can we help the Oyate stay cool in those 100 plus temperatures in the summers? And then you mentioned food sovereignty, growing our own food, but we also have to think about water management. How are we going to store water? How are we going to stop the wasteful practices with water? And what about the tribe? Should they install solar on every house? Start making a transition to electric cars. Start trading these gas guzzlers into electric cars and things like that. I think there's a lot of things we can start, doing now to get ready, because what's not trying to cause a panic, but in 50 years from now, we won't be here. We may not be here, but our grandchildren are going to be here. Yeah. And they're the ones that are going to have to. They need this information today. So down the road, as Lakota, we talk about. Always mention this at meetings, is the future generations, the the 7 generations. What are we going to, how are we going to help the Hakojas in the future, beginning in 2050 and so on? How are we going to, address the climate change? I don't see any movement right now. I don't, just that our climate adaptation planning, it could help a lot, I think. I want to thank James Radling Leaf and Robin O'Malley and Kara Mulvihill are all on this call today. It looks like James jumped off there earlier, but those are things that we need to think about. So thank you for your time, Claude. And then Sam's going to be on here at 2:30 too. So he has some interesting stories about the dinosaurs during the time when our people hunted the dinosaurs. So you have to try to keep these stories alive so that the future generations could use these stories. So hopefully your stories will make it to 7 generations down the line. And at some point we're getting close to the Robin, could you give us an update on the climate adaptation plan, where we're at and where we're going with that real quick?
Sure, and let me thank Claude for his words first. Sure, the next thing that's going to happen within, I believe, starting March 7th, is that there will be a survey of all the residents of Rosebud, asking them some of the kinds of questions we asked. Have you seen changes? What kind of changes are there? What are the effects that you care about? And what do you think we might do as a nation? So those questions are going to start to be asked, and we've been listening to a lot of people and have a draft of a climate strategy. So we're going to start to take what we hear from the survey and build it into what we've heard already. And so in a few months, we'll be able to talk with people about what real steps and go more methodically through different areas and think about what, as you said, our greenhouses are a useful thing to do in the in relation to plants. That would be a great, that's a wonderful conversation. So we'll be doing that soon to start to lay some of these things out as to what the choices are and what the tribe can do.
Thank you, Robin. Well, Kashi, I think we're gonna close it up at this time. And
Oh,
Wopila Tanka Chichelo, Hechela,
oh,
Bonafu, Miyako Pikilina, Hechela, Yuha Tokata, Uyampi Kitalo.
oh,
Thank you to Claude and his input is very valuable. We're going to be moving forward with his information, and then we're getting very close to a draft of the climate adaptation plan soon in a few months. So maybe sooner, I hope, but we'll be able to make another report down the road to the tribal council, and hopefully we'll be near completion very soon. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for those that are listening out there on Sichangu land and different places at Ocheti, Shakoni, Kate Topatakia, the 4 directions. Pilama Palo.
oh, yeah. Opla.